Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue watching the Demi Lovato documentary on YouTube. I'm going to react to it. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. As I always say, every episode that I ever do, since it's psychology, can be potentially triggering, and so you want to take care of yourself and maybe not watch this video if you are worried about being triggered. The other thing I always say is never use YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You deserve it. Let's watch.
If I found a Demi Lovato, I would want to lock her down too. Do you know what I'm saying?
Thank you.
Do you know what I'm saying?
There's so much more of me that I have yet to explore, and one of the good things about this experience is that I've used this time to look within, and also I feel like I'm actually too queer to marry a man in my life right now.
Okay, so she's saying, I'm using this time to look within. Great. I really hope that means that she is working with someone in trauma recovery and addiction recovery as intensely that is recommended for anyone in a situation like this. I'm not hearing anything, though. I also heard from her that she's proud of herself, that she didn't fall into hard drugs, which implies maybe she is using soft drugs. Now, she's not my client. She's not my sister. She has no obligation to me. I'm mainly saying this because I guess I worry about her, and I hope that she has that kind of support. Now, if she isn't involved in that, which I have no idea, maybe she is, but if she's not involved, because I'm quite sure people recommended the things that I said, it's a very standard treatment protocol, which is the meetings every day, maybe tapering off to 4 or 5 times a week NA meetings. Intensive outpatient, meaning the group therapy for drug and alcohol treatment, lasts for a year. Again, in the first 6 months, it's usually 2 or 3 times a week, and then it kind of tapers off to once a week, once a month, that kind of thing. But she's still in that early phase, so we would expect if she were following recommendations, particularly given the amount of problem that she had, it would be very, very unusual if this wasn't recommended. In fact, I almost guarantee you that these things were recommended. We would expect her at this phase to be going to a meeting every day, and then every other day going to some kind of either drug and alcohol treatment, small group, or individual therapy, maybe even group therapy, but individual therapy for relational trauma recovery. Cognitive behavioral therapy, possibly. Anyway, so if she's not involved in those things, why wouldn't she be? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. One is that for some people, they just don't want to. And why wouldn't they want to? Well, it's because they feel like they can do it on their own. And the addict part of their mind is like, we don't need that stuff. Because the addict part of the mind is saying, if we go, then that makes it so that my voice becomes less and less and less. That's one of the things that is really miraculous or helpful about NA and AA meetings. You know, sometimes people think like, why do I want to go into a room in a church of the basement of a church and raise my hand and say that I'm an addict? I mean, what good would that do? Well, the thing that it does is it's just a bunch of human beings. There's no therapist there. It's just a group of people who are going through recovery. And you can talk or you can not talk. And some people will say, I've got 5, I need 2 minutes. I got to talk about what's happening in my life right now. And other people just listen. How can that help? Well, the reason why this often helps is that everyone in that room is dedicated to sobriety in some way, shape, or form. And when you are in their presence, you soak up that motivation, and it gives you power, and it bolsters your resolve for sobriety. It reminds you, oh yeah, that's why I'm dedicated to sobriety, because I've been there before. When that person told that story about waking up and they didn't know how they got there, I've been there too. And yeah, that's why I'm sober. That is one of the major reasons. People talk about you have to, hand it over to God. Well, what if I'm an atheist and I don't want to go to AA meetings? And they have atheists, they're non-religious 12-step programs. So people talk about the 12 steps. To me, in my experience working with clients, the most important factor that these meetings provide is that social bolstering of motivation for sobriety. And in early recovery, you need as much motivation and bolstering as you possibly can. 5 years down the line, maybe you only need to go to a meeting once a week or once a month or something like that, because your dedication to sobriety only slightly diminishes over time. But in early recovery, it's very tenuous. So anyway, some people won't want to go there because their addict part of their brain is like, you don't want to go there. The other part is of that addict brain was saying, like, they're going to tell you that you can't drink alcohol, but you know you can drink alcohol. You're fine on alcohol. It's just heroin that you need to avoid. Alcohol is fine. When the addict mind knows that the alcohol not only continues the cycle of using substances to deal with our problems, but it also knows that it's going to lead to other substances down the road. I have no idea if this is what's going on with Demi, by the way. Zero idea, by the way. The other possibility is that they're being given bad advice. There's a lot of advice online that, AA isn't good for you, or you don't need to do this sort of thing. You can do this program. You can do an intensive. She talked about something like that. And you might be sold a bill of goods that's actually inaccurate. That's another reason why other people won't go through it. Another reason why people won't go to treatment is because they're worried about their traumas coming up, because they have so much trauma that they don't want to face it for very good reasons. And listen to all my other episodes about trauma and trauma recovery on that. There's a lot of really legitimate reasons why people don't want to talk about their traumas. It's actually healthy to allow themselves to pace themselves as to when and how they talk about their traumas. So sometimes they need to work with a trauma specialist to help them to pace themselves as they go through recovery, and some of their traumas come up and they might feel compelled to talk about them, but they also need to know, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. I'm on a 5-year plan with that story. So that's another reason. There's a lot of other reasons, but I'm just going to hope that she is following the recommendations that she was given by the clinicians.
And the ability to say, like, oh, yeah, I want the relief that I used to associate with using those types of drugs, and I don't want to.
If there was ever a time where you were going to do drugs, I think it would be after you broke off your engagement. Given everything that's happened, are you entirely sober now?
I've learned that shutting the door on things makes me want to open the door even more. I've learned that it doesn't work for me to say, I'm never going to do this again.
Uh-oh. I'm laughing because I'm scared for her. I heard a lot of people say that, and then fast forward the clock a month, a year, and their life was even worse than it was the last time they relapsed. Now, is it possible that for Demi Lovato, this statement is true? So let's rewind that and listen to what she said. And again, I have no idea, but if I were her friend or her therapist and I heard her say that, given what she's told us thus far in this documentary, I'd be really afraid for her life. So let's rewind the clock.
I've learned that shutting the door on things makes me want to open the door even more. I've learned that it doesn't work for me to say, I'm never going to do this again.
Yeah, it's classic. And she could be right. Essentially what she's saying, and I'm going to expand on what she's saying, so I don't know if she would agree with this expansion, but it sounds like she's saying, and this is classic, that there's a crossroads that people come to in recovery. Usually what happens is you hit bottom, it's really awful, and you're just like, I'm done. That was awful. I don't want to risk getting there at all, so I'm done. All substances off the table. Again, without proper recovery, without really dedicating yourself to the fact that you're powerless and that abstinence is probably the only answer, the addict mind starts to get into you, or certain ideas or influences from the outside or something, and you start saying, well, do I really have to give up all substances? Because, alcohol is really great, or marijuana just really takes the edge off, or does this mean I can never have fun again for the rest of my life? Now, these are distortions. People 20 years down the road of recovery would not characterize their life as having no fun. There's that when you only have had fun on substances, you can't imagine having fun without substances. A lot of people have fun without substances. And in a lot of ways, you have a lot more fun, plus you remember having the fun, and you don't almost kill yourself having the fun. They actually have done experiments on people where they give them beer that has no alcohol in it, near beer, right? And they tell them that there's alcohol in it, and people will have so much more fun. And you'll ask them, why'd you have so much fun while you were in that group? And they'll say, well, I don't know, I was drunk. And then the researchers know, we actually gave you no alcohol. You just thought you were drunk and you had fun. Anyway, point is that, and I'm not fully up to date on that research, but I remember reading about that not too long ago. Anyway, point is that you get to a crossroad and you think, okay, I'm out of the woods. I'm back on track. Now I have to really deal with the rest of my life. And this is actually, again, in early recovery, which she is, people would tell her this is what we call future tripping, where you do not want to think about far into the future. Because if you think far into the future, it'll ruin you in the present. And what some people will do is they'll be like, oh, I can never have fun again. Oh, I can never use substances again. Oh, what if I have a problem and I just need a drink, or everything's just going to fall apart. And what some people will choose is they'll say, I can't do it. I can't give up a lifetime of having occasional glasses of wine or a lifetime of smoking marijuana occasionally. I just can't give that up. That, the rest of my life, that's too much for me. I can't handle that. And again, someone in recovery would be right there in your ear if you were going to meetings, and they would say, don't think about that, one day at a time. Be sober today. Don't think about a month from now. Don't think about a year from now. That will always screw you up in the present if you think that far about those sorts of things. Right now, you know that using substances is awful. And you also know that being sober today will definitely be a good idea for you for a variety of reasons that you've explored. So don't think about the future. It's not helpful to do that. Now, no one can control Demi Lovato in that way, but that would be the advice that someone would give her. And you would, in AA or NA meetings, you would hear other people talking about it. You'd hear other people saying like, yeah, I started thinking about how I would, I'm just to give up substances for the rest of my life. Like, that's just like terrible. I can't do that. But then I remembered I was future tripping and I'm not supposed to do that. And then you as an observer would go, oh, yeah, I'm doing the same thing. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I understand what they're saying. That's what the magic of these groups are like. Anyway. So I'm guessing, again, total speculation, she got to the crossroads and she just could not give up that future. And she also wasn't really done using substances. That's one of the things that's heartbreaking about watching someone go through recovery is they will hit. We saw in a previous episode the medical situation she went through. Why would anyone return to using substances after that? It happens. It happens. It's almost universal that it happens. And it's heartbreaking and it's disappointing. If you're close to someone like this, you're like, okay, now we're done. Okay, they admitted they have a problem. They almost died. They knew they shouldn't use. And then they start using again. You're like, what's happening right now? What are you doing? What are you doing? But they'll have a convincing narrative. They're like, you know what? It's just a little bit of alcohol. It's not a big deal. I'm not using hard drugs. I don't want to use that. I'm totally fine. I'm totally okay. And they probably believe it. And they might actually be fine. But to open the door, to leave the door ajar, is to allow it to eventually come in. Meaning that if for a lot of, and again, I was talking about abstinence only and harm reduction. So there's a harm reduction argument for what she's doing. The abstinence-only people would say, no. She is playing with fire. And it's just, if she allows herself to continue thinking that way, it's just a matter of time before she hits bottom again, and she might not live through it. So we also heard her say something else, which is also kind of classic, which is that she was experiencing the difficulty of complete sobriety. And that was causing her a lot of stress, which is natural, right? You're going through early recovery and you have a lot of stress. Now, that's why you have daily NA meetings. That's why you have group drug and alcohol therapy. That's why you have your personal therapist. And all those people work on all the things you need to do in between those meetings so that you can deal with the high amount of distress of going through early recovery. Because there's a huge part of your body that is like, you need to use, you need to use, you need to use, you need to use. And you need to use anything because you can't be sober. That's just not going to work. And it's just like yelling at you, use, use, use. And there's a lot of energy put into like saying no to that, no to that. And it's very tense. It's hard. It's not easy, especially in early recovery. And there's this temptation that's just like, look, if I just have a glass of wine, I'll relax. And this itch that I'm feeling, I'll be able to itch just a little bit. It's not heroin. It's just a glass of wine. It's fine. It's just an edible. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And then they're white knuckling it because they're not going to meetings. They're white knuckling it because they're not going to group therapy. They're white knuckling it because they're not involving a team of sober people and, multiple sponsors helping them out. And they're white knuckling it, and then they're just like, oh, screw it. I'm just gonna have a glass of wine. That's it. They have a glass of wine and they relax. And they're like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's better. And so it feels like maybe it's better if I let it in a little bit, because if I keep it all out, then the energy makes me want to use heroin because I'm so tensed up with the energy of wanting to use that I'm going to explode. And so it's better if I let in a little bit because then I can relax than if I try to keep everything out and I explode and I go off the deep end. Now, and that's almost what she was saying, right? She's like, I found out that trying to push it out completely was causing more problems than letting it in a little bit. And for some people, that's possible. Anecdotally, I will say, especially given her presentation and the amount of compulsive use that she has exhibited according to her stories, I would give her a 1% chance of that working. Again, I don't know if that's an accurate representation. It's possible that it will work for her to let in the substances a little bit. But I would say it's extremely more likely that if she is letting in substances, that it will lead to another relapse of some sort. We can only hope that if it does lead to relapse, that it doesn't kill her in the process, and then she can reinvigorate her dedication to complete sobriety. And again, is she getting the support she needs? Because she's not talking like someone who is.
I've really, really struggled with this. I know I'm done with the stuff that's gonna kill me, right? But I wish that I could get some relief, maybe through weed or something, right? And telling myself that I can never have a drink or smoke marijuana, I feel like that's setting myself up for failure.
So I've reacted to a lot of things on this channel. A lot of it's 90 Day Fiancé. I've reacted to other things, other videos that y'all have asked me to watch. I've never been this terrified. I've never been this scared. When I watch these videos, if I was just passively watching, it's one thing, but, to watch and to get sort of involved in it as a commentator, I feel like I feel kind of clinically connected, and that means part of my heart is involved in this. I'm legitimately terrified of what she is saying right now, because now maybe it'll work out. Maybe the relapse won't be so bad. Maybe she'll get the help that she needs and she'll reevaluate this idea. Maybe marijuana will be fine, but given her lifestyle, given her compulsive nature, given her traumas that I'm sure she hasn't recovered from yet, or I'm not sure, I would highly speculate that she hasn't had enough time, and we're still not hearing. We've heard from a case manager. That's not a therapist. That I don't even know what that exactly means. It's probably someone that gives advice about what treatment she's supposed. That's usually what that case manager usually means. They're the person that says you need to go to this professional and get evaluated. Go to this professional, and then follow their recommendation. We're not hearing about any any 12-step groups. We're not hearing about any drug and alcohol treatment. We're not hearing about any therapy. Now, maybe it's all happening, but she sure is talking like someone who has none of that. And given the fact that she was so close to death last time, if Amy Winehouse were alive, and during the YouTube times, would she have made something like this? Are we watching that right now? Now, as a public, we don't have any power. This is Demi Lovato's life. She can do what she wants. And that's we can reach out to her and say, hey, I'm worried about you. But it's in her hands. And we're all, or at least I'm now experiencing a thing that I have experienced many times before, which is other people are powerless over their problem, and I'm definitely powerless over their problem. But yeah, I'm legitimately afraid for her. I really am. I cannot diagnose from afar. I have no idea, but I'm just hearing some you heard me not too long ago saying the things that I was like, sometimes people do it, and then she's saying the exact thing. And why do I know that? Well, because anyone who works in drug and alcohol treatment has heard these phrases so many times. It's almost universal that people going through recovery who haven't fully accepted that they have a problem will say these things. The difference between people in Demi Lovato's class and people who struggle that are in a different class is that Demi Lovato is the sort of compulsive user who will use substances to such a degree in such a self-destructive manner that she could kill herself. She could use marijuana for a while and be okay. And then she's just like, well, what's a glass of wine? And then it's like, well, what's a bottle of wine? Now that I'm really drunk, what's a little heroin? Now, what she would do is she would use uppers and downers at the same time. I'm legitimately worried.
Because I am such a black and white thinker. I had it drilled into my head for so many years that one drink was equivalent to a crack pipe.
So one drink is not equivalent to a crack pipe. In our society, we tend to have these rankings. You have heroin and crack and these sorts of things, and then below that might be Percocet and cocaine, and below that, those are complete false tiers. We have that's all just related to stigma. That's all just related to like how society feels about like, oh, heroin, it sounds so scary. But yet when you get your wisdom teeth pulled out, they will give you an opiate, and it's the same basic effect you have on the brain. So taking a pain medication for back pain or some other thing, totally fine. Heroin, oh my God, totally scary. So we have these extremely weird designations that are based on ideas from like the Nixon era about like what drugs are supposed to be. So who knows about the equivalency of crack cocaine and a glass of wine. But yes, if she just has a glass of wine or if she just has an edible, then the chance of something bad happening is pretty low. But the chance of allowing substances into your life leading to something very terrible happen is the chance is very good. The chance is very high that if she allows substances into her life, that substances will become a problem for her. And that is what I'm not hearing from her. And that is what she would hear if she were going to treatment, if she were going to therapy, if she were going to meetings. No one would say that in that context. No one would say, what they would say is, you know what, Demi Lovato, you're right. One glass of wine isn't probably a problem. It could be a problem, but it probably isn't a problem. One glass of wine probably isn't a problem. But the mindset of someone with your problem allowing substances into your life, that is a problem. That is almost guaranteed to be a problem. That one glass of wine, probably not going to be a problem. The mindset of someone with your problem allowing substances into your life and making excuses to use substances, that is a problem. And that's not what we're hearing from her. What we're hearing are the classic denial statements that people will make. Now, I have no idea. She might be in the right. She might have been through all the treatment. She might, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, she might find that she was right, that she could use soft drugs and be okay. and only minor problems like an occasional hangover, forgetfulness, or a little bit of paranoia or something. Maybe she can do that. But at what risk does she want to experiment with that?
I've been hesitant to share until now that I've been smoking weed and drinking in moderation. After almost dying from the OD and after so many years of being the poster child of sobriety, I didn't want people to criticize me for that. And I also don't.
So that should not be happening. No one should be criticizing her. That is one of the worst things you could ever do. One, who are you to criticize anyone about what they're going through in their life? Look at yourself first, okay? So no one should be criticizing her. No one should be saying, she's a hypocrite, or I just can't imagine I'm a minor YouTube personality, and I understand times whatever sort of negativity I get occasionally times a billion. I just can't imagine. And the fact that she's a woman online, which women get treated much worse than men do online. So I just can't imagine what she's going through, and that shouldn't happen. Now, if we make this more relatable to us, when we are going through recovery and we start to go into denial and maybe we're going down a bad road and we start getting shamed for that, which is a natural thing, because, it'd be natural. So say Demi wasn't famous and her friends are like, her family are like, what are you doing? Like maybe her younger sister would be like, what are you doing? You can't use alcohol. Don't make those excuses. Stop that. There's this natural tendency to be hostile towards the individual and like want to slap them across the face or shake them and say, what do you, stop it? But that doesn't help. It's not a helpful tactic. A helpful tactic is to stay close while protecting yourself, because if you get too close, you're going to get dragged over the cliff with them. But you do your best to help. You just say, so do you want unsolicited advice or do you not? I'm not going to shame you, but I'm just going to tell you I'm worried about you. And maybe you're right that you can handle weed and alcohol, but that's not what I've heard about this sort of thing. And is it really worth it? What do you gain from alcohol and marijuana that would offset the risk of you dying, which is extremely possible if you allow substances in your life? But I'm not here to judge. It's your life, and I love you and I'm with you. So because when people struggle with substance problems, it's usually messy. It's very normal. That when people eventually achieve sobriety, one of the things that they will look back on is that when they had problems with their recovery, people did not generally shame them. You'll hear that. You'll hear people say, after 5 years of a messy recovery, they'll look back and they'll look to their spouse, they'll look to their family, they'll look to their friends, and they'll say, I just want to thank you for not shaming me when you saw me going through the ups and downs and you heard me saying the ridiculous things. I just want to thank you for not shaming me in that moment, because that would have made it worse for me. I needed to figure it out for myself. And I was already shaming myself anyway. I didn't need to hear it from you. And thank you so much for not saying it, because that actually would have set me back. Because what that can do is it can cause people who are going through recovery is to push away from anyone who is giving them advice about sobriety and turn to people that are in the throes of addiction, because they're not going to say those things to you. It also causes the person to beat themselves up more, which causes them to feel worse, which causes them to need substance more to cover up the feelings. So no one should be beating her up for a very normal early recovery snafu.
I don't want people to hear that and think that they can just go out and try having a drink or smoking a joint, because it isn't for everybody. Recovery isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And you shouldn't be forced to get sober if you're not ready. You shouldn't get sober for other people. You have to do it for yourself.
So all that is true, that you can't force someone, or it's very hard to force someone to go through recovery and get sober. And you do need to get sober for yourself, and you can't do it for other people. You have to do it for your own personal reasons. That all is true. And I'm terrified for her. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself and take care of others because we all deserve it. We really, really do.